Hey, what's up? It's Nate. Before we start the show, here's a quick message from Theater Arts Tucson. Oh, right, it's still me. Theater Arts Tucson is the company that I run with the goal of promoting theater to audiences around southern Arizona. If you'd like to learn more and see the calendar with all of the professional productions in Tucson, visit theaterartstucson.com. You can also check it out on Facebook and Instagram at Theater Arts Tucson. Your support is very much appreciated. Now, on to the show. Hey everybody, welcome to TheatreQs. Thank you so much for being here today. As always, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm really glad to be back from our summer vacation. It was a longer break, so I'm happy to be back, but today's fun fact is a long one, so we're going to jump right in. You may have read theater reviews in newspapers like the Arizona Daily Star, the New York Times, and other publications. But do you know why these reviews are important? Jonathan Mandel, a theater journalist, wrote in an essay on HowlRound Theater Commons that theater reviews can, quote, help careers, boost morale, and even aid a creative team in refashioning a show, end quote. He says, however, that the purpose of theater criticism is to guide audiences to which theater experiences are worthwhile and to spark debate among theater goers. Theaters like to use positive reviews to bolster interest in their productions. However, negative reviews can have a similar effect. In 2011, a theater critic for the New York Times, Jason Zinnemann, wrote a piece about the impact of negative theater reviews. He writes that theater goers would not give as much credit to the positive reviews without the negative ones, and that some negative reviews may boost interest in a production. He also adds, quote, social networking has made critics more accessible and increasingly allowed artists and those who cover them to exchange ideas while retaining necessary distance, end quote. Zinnemann wrote in an article last year for the American Theater magazine, quote, the choice in the near future is no longer between a good review or a bad one, a second take or a single review. It's between something or nothing. The smart money is on nothing. With newspapers around the nation struggling, including local papers here in Arizona and nationally recognized papers like the Washington Post, theater critics are getting the boot. Some newspapers don't even have a theater critic anymore. However, Zinnemann claims that theater critics are vital because of the short-lasting nature of theater. Without critics, musicals and plays that have an impact on society may go unnoticed simply because of the lack of a reviewer. Theater reviews, positive or negative, can have a massive impact on theater across the nation. It is important that we keep theater reviewers, like my guest today, writing for the benefit of not only the audiences, but for the theater industry as a whole. Speaking of my guest today was a reporter for the Tucson Citizen, climbing the ranks to positions like the assistant business editor and the associate features editor. Near the turn of the century, she accepted a position as a theater reviewer for the Arizona Daily Star, a position which she held for nearly 20 years. As the theater reviewer, she created the MAC Awards, which recognized outstanding actors and productions around Tucson for 2 decades. She retired in 2019, but still writes freelance reviews for the Star. Her reviews are widely read and appreciated by theater goers across southern Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of my favorite journalists and one of my favorite people, Kathleen Allen. First of all, thank you for being here.
You are welcome.
So just sort of introduce yourself and some of your favorite projects that you've worked on throughout your career.
Whoa. Kathy Allen. I was the theater critic for the Star until I retired in 2019, although I still do freelance theater reviews. Some of my favorite projects is, I done a big story on diversity in the theater.
Oh, cool.
That was really fun to to report and really interesting and sometimes disheartening. And this was, when there was a big to do uh, um, about how diverse theater was. I'm trying to remember what year it was. I mean, it's in the like last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really uh, an interesting and I felt consequential story to report on. It was an important issue, I thought. And it was really fun. It was really fun researching ATC's. I don't know if it's I think it's their 40th anniversary season, and going back over 4 decades of the plays and what had worked and what hadn't worked, and because that ATC has really had a up and down kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So offhand, those are in theater wise. I mean, there are other stories that I felt I really loved doing, but theater wise, those are the ones that sort of rise to the top. I would have to go through all my archives to tell you anymore.
Um, so when did you first get involved in theater? Were you interested as a kid? Did you go and see shows a lot?
Yes, I went to see shows a lot, and I was involved in Tucson Children's Theater, run by this woman by the name of Mary McMurtry, who's long passed. Um, so I was probably 6 or 7 years old. Uh, so I started doing stuff on stage, and at some point realized that I was not the best person to do anything on stage. So it's been a lifelong passion of mine. And when I got the job at the Star as the theater writer, I I couldn't believe my luck. And that was in 2000, I think, or
Okay.
1999. Wow, that was before you were born, right?
It was, yeah.
What year were you born?
2009.
Oh my God, I was like an old, much hated theater reviewer by then. But I remember when you were born. Yeah. I just don't
What,
remember the year. Go ahead.
what was the first show that you saw, or at least a show that made an impact on you?
Royal Shakespeare came through Tucson. I was probably in the sixth grade. Uh, and they did, I I think it must have been one of the comedies. I can't remember. I just remember how thrilling it was to see these British actors on the stage. It was at the Temple of Music and Art.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, so of course we had done all this research on it before. You know how teachers are; they want you to know what you're doing. Um, that's the first play I remember. I mean, I know that there were others I must have seen before then, the children's plays and stuff, but I can't remember. I remember sitting in the balcony at Temple of Music and Art and watching incredible actors.
I couldn't think of a better venue to watch your first show in because
I know it, or a better company, the Royal Shakespeare Company.
yeah. When did
So
they stop touring to Tucson?
when did they stop touring?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they very rarely after that. I think that David Ira, who that was a former artistic director at ATC,
Mm-hmm.
I, in my head, he kind of sponsored them coming in once or twice, but I don't ever remember it being as big of a deal as it was when I was a kid.
Hmm. Cool. Um, so obviously you wrote in as the theater writer for the Arizona Daily Star. What was your first job in the newspaper industry?
I was a business writer. Oh, actually, I was a, a gossip columnist. It's a society columnist, and I loved it because I could make society what I wanted it to be. So it's my little anarchy approach to society. And that was in the mid 80s.
Okay.
Uh, and eventually I got um, away from that and went into business and then into features. And that was at the Citizen where your dad and I first met. Um, and then eventually, I was a backup theater writer.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, when Chuck Graham was out of town, I got to write theater, but um, he just never left town. So so when this job opening came up at the Star, I, I mean, I still can't believe I got it.
But you did, and here we are.
I know, here we are. Yeah.
Have you had you going into um your first job at the Citizen, had you always liked writing? Had that always been something that interested you?
Yes, I grew up in a family of writers. My father was a writer and a lot of them were writers. My sister's a poet and the other ones, anyway. Uh, so writing was the one thing I knew I could do well. I was a terrible student. I hated school. Um, but writing was something that was really thrilling to be able to tell a story. And I couldn't do fiction writing, I couldn't do creative writing, but talking to people and writing a story from that. We used to have a family newspaper that we handed out over the summer. We would do it in the summer and write stories about our day in Mount Lemon or stuff. And, we were the only subscribers, but it was really fun to do it. And so it just went on from there.
Do you still look back on that? Do those experiences early on still help you when you're writing theater reviews?
Um, I think what has most influenced my writing theater reviews was my doing theater myself. Um, because I think uh, it would it made me more empathetic for people who are on stage. I knew what it was like to be on stage. I mean, I think that some actress, Lillian Russell, or someone who probably you've never heard of, a 40s actress, once said that acting is really easy. All you do is stand on stage naked and turn around slowly. You just become so vulnerable when you're on stage. And I think that is one of the things I always remember when I do theater writing is that, these are human beings who are putting themselves out and, giving this a gift. Maybe we don't like the gift, but so being harsh,
Hmm.
being personal is something I try to avoid. And you're writing about somebody's acting. I don't know how it cannot be personal, but you can be personal without being crude.
Have you ever had an actor who sees your review and then takes your feedback, and the next time you see them, your opinion of them has changed?
I've no, I mean I've seen actors grow, but so from one year to the next, I'll see differences. But I think it's their own input and their directors and their own growing that make them change rather than mine. I'm just, I was just a theater reviewer, and sometimes I got people happy, sometimes I got people mad. I had a real few of those writing letters to the editor about me. But I think that uh, it would be hubris to think I had any kind of impact in that way on people.
Do you enjoy the people that like write letters to the editor, disagreeing with you? Because I know, the former cartoonist at the Daily Star, David Fitzsimmons, he loved that. Like he
He
ate that
loves it,
up.
yeah. Um, it's really interesting when uh, I mean, nobody likes to be trashed in the newspaper, you know, but I kind of feel like I had to take something from it, and say, okay, was this true? I mean, somebody once wrote me and said, you must have been in a really foul mood the night you wrote that review. I thought about it and I thought, I was in a really foul mood. And I can't remember if I went back to see it. I don't think I did, but uh, and I don't think I've been in a foul mood since I went to the theater since. Or if I did something to get me out of it before I saw a play I had to review. Uh, you like people hating you because they're reading you, but
Yeah.
uh, otherwise, I'm not crazy about it.
Do you have a specific mindset, going into a show that you have to get into, or do you watch it as an audience member and critique it as such?
Um, yes, I do a whole bunch of research. I usually read the plays beforehand. I try to read interviews with the playwrights if they're available. Oftentimes, I used to interview the playwright or interview the director. So I go in uh, well informed about what I'm going to see, but and I take my notebook out, but I very rarely take notes and experience it as an audience member. And then,
We
go home and say, what the hell did they do that? And what did that mean? And it's hard, last night I saw Dial M for Murder at ATC,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to figure out this kind of really beautiful set, but I don't know why they did it.
Hmm.
It's the walls were almost like cracked mirrors. And I don't know if it was supposed to represent the psyche of the guy who's trying to kill his wife, or so I don't know where that just came from, because I guess I've been thinking about that all morning. So yeah, as an audience member, I go in, but as a theater writer, it's my job to be uh, well versed on what I'm seeing, and to be to be critical and try to be accurate about what I'm saying, what I'm writing.
We've been talking a lot in my theater class at the high school about um, director's intent and playwright's intent. Have you, uh, do you look for that? I mean, obviously you do, but is that something, have you ever seen a show where it's a complete contradiction to the playwright's intent or a new interpretation? Do you enjoy that, or do you like shows to stay true to the original work?
No, I like theater that evolves, so it's uh I mean, you could do it with Shakespeare, you could do, I mean, again, Dial M for Murder, which was a play back in the 40s, I think, and then a movie in the 50s, an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Uh, this is a Jeffrey Hatcher uh, adaptation, and he tried to insert stuff to kind of modernize it. Instead of a man and a woman as the two lovers, it's two women. Little things like that. I'm so I don't mind changes like that. Uh, I don't like it when the text is changed,
Oh,
because
okay.
that's just really disrespectful to the playwright, I think.
Hmm.
But I like it when plays are done differently, that give me different perspective. And Shakespeare's classic that way. You can do Shakespeare in traditional dress, or you can do it in modern dress, or whatever, but however you present it brings something new for me out of him, out of what he's saying. He says a lot.
We saw in New York this summer Heidi Schreck's version of Uncle Vanya.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and
How was it?
it was great. It was, I mean, it received mixed reviews, but it brought it down to the audience's level. It took out the um, you know, old language barriers, and I know I read a little bit about it after, and they did a lot of research to try and substitute references to 18th century Russia or 17th century Russia that Chekhov put in there. So it's like they took out the horse-drawn carriages and things like that. So it's not changing the work, but it was making it understandable, making it a little bit more modern, which I really enjoyed.
Maybe more relevant to us today.
Yeah.
So the text wasn't changed, other than maybe simplifying the language or
Hmm.
de-Russianing the language.
Yes. De-Russianing.
Yeah, because I mean, a Chekhov can be hard. Can also be pretty wonderful too. I mean, he's very funny. I don't think he was in Vanya, but that's interesting. What else did you
Yeah.
see?
We saw Hadestown, which was great. I loved it. That
Yeah.
was my first time seeing it, so
Oh, yeah. It's a
yeah.
wonderful one, isn't it?
Yes, it
Did you
is.
all know all the Greek myths? Did you?
I knew most of them, yeah.
So proud of you.
And then we also saw Back to the Future, which was pretty good. The it was more, I think, the visuals were the highlight,
Yeah.
because they actually had the car and made it fly, and it just visually very cool.
So pretty tech heavy show then too.
Very, yeah, yeah. Um, so moving back to you, we were
Always.
we were talking about your work at the Tucson Citizen, and you wore a lot of hats before you got the job as the theater reviewer at the Star. So how did your writing in features and business help you when you first broke into that theater review scene?
Well, I think actually it's all the same. I mean, of course, the more you write, the better you get. So, I was a better writer when I ended than when I started. Uh, um, but, writing stories, it's about the facts and putting a story together with the facts. Uh, that doesn't happen with theater because, well, the fact is the play. Um, Actually, I mean, now that I think it is, that's a hard question. I don't know how to compare the two. Maybe you could just say writing is writing, but uh, doing theater reviews, I mean, I had done restaurant reviews, so I knew how to write my opinion.
Okay.
But doing the theater reviews is really pretty heavy opinion writing, and I'm not real vocal with my opinions unless I'm writing them.
um, so your husband is an actor. Um,
He is retired.
how has his experience in the industry helped you gain a new perspective, if at all, on the shows that you're seeing?
Absolutely, it did. He was my partner with theater for a long time. And to me, as you know, because we've done this, I need to discuss a play afterwards. When it's right after, it's what's on top of my
Hmm.
head. What did you think of that? Did this work for you? It didn't for me, etc. Uh, but his perspective was could really address the impact the director had. This
Oh,
choice was
interesting.
made likely a director's choice as opposed to the actor's choice, and trying to say, I think the director was trying to say this here, and uh, so he was well versed on directing. Um, I was well versed on theater, but not necessarily on directing.
Hmm.
So he really that really helped me, and luckily we have our taste is similar in theater. Our perspective is similar. If he walks out not caring for a play, it's I usually haven't cared for it either. But we also have had differing opinions. So, but I was the writer. So, he would spend our ride home saying, this is why it didn't work and blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, well, this is why it did work. And then I got to write why I thought it worked.
You get the final say.
Yeah, I get the final say, power in the pen or the
Oh,
keyboards.
speaking of power in the pen slash keyboards, how has the sort of digital shift in newspapers changed theater reviews, if at all?
Um, I don't think that really have, except for some writers write much longer reviews than you could if you were limited to space in the newspaper. Uh, in fact, I think shifting to digital might be better for the arts, for theater, because newspapers, hard copy newspapers, are just dropping the arts left and right. The Phoenix paper no longer has a theater writer. I have no idea if my freelance budget is going to be renewed. The fiscal year starts October 1st. Um, and newspapers seem to care less and less about the cultural temperature of community, which is
Hmm.
pretty tragic to me.
Well, and especially here, I mean, it's like there are new theater companies popping up left and right. I mean, the theater scene in Tucson is booming right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing how and we just need to. I mean, I find there is so much hope and so much clarity uh, and so much profundity in theater that allows us to move forward, as a society. And for newspapers to neglect that, I mean, what do we remember from ancient Greek? It's the philosophers, the playwrights, and I think that it's a great disservice is being done to our cultural life when newspapers get rid of that.
When you started reviewing theater, would you have ever expected that the theater scene here in Tucson would be as big as it is?
Well, it's sort of waxed and waned. I remember when I first started, there are a couple experimental theaters that, and of course, I can't remember the name of any of them. Uh, Experimental theaters were popping up all over the place, and then a few years later, they would pop back down. So it, what I am surprised about is how many of the theaters have legs here, have
Mm-hmm.
been able to hold on. I mean, especially through the pandemic. But the Rogue Theater, Live Theater Workshop, Invisible Theater, ATC, uh, they hung on through that in the pandemic, uh, and that's pretty astounding. And now to see some fresh companies coming up, which is going to give us fresh perspective, and it's very exciting. In 3 years we'll probably go back down again, but I would hope not.
Mm-hmm. Um, when you started reviewing at the Daily Star, you started the Mac Awards, which was named after the legendary presence behind Tucson Children's Theater, who you mentioned earlier. For the listeners who don't know, would you explain a little bit about the history of the Mac Awards?
Well, during the uh, yeah, for a little bit of background, Mary McMurtry came here in the 40s, I think, and started children's theater. And there are generations of kids who went through her theater, who ended up in Hollywood and on stage. And but mostly she taught us how to think, you know. Um, but she cared about excellence, and that's a hard thing to care about when you're dealing with kids. But she, you know, and I mean, because we're not excellent when we're kids, unless it's to our parents. But you know, excellence for our age. And she cared that we love theater. So when I started doing the theater reviews, uh, I think the first one was 2000. It made sense to me to call them the Mac Awards after Mary McMurtry, who was long gone. But anyway, so that's just a little background on it. So your question was, what was the genesis of the awards?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of every year, we're supposed to do a recap of the year, our favorite restaurants, favorite plays, whatever. So I decided to, even though it's mid-season for most theater companies, I decided to take a look at the whole year, January to December, and make that my end of year story as the MAC Awards. It was as simple as that. And it was really hard to do. That's sort of it was hard to do because I had to go back over all the plays I saw. I had to make sure that I was being fair and looked at things from all different aspects. I mean, if you want excellence in theater, you're going to get the professional theaters.
Mm-hmm.
There, but there are more shades to theater than great acting. You know, so that was how that started, and I did it every year until I retired. I think I actually did it 1 year after I retired.
I think so,
No,
yeah.
it's because the pandemic came on right after I retired.
Oh, okay. What were the awards' impact on the community? I still see people who have, MAC award winner in their
No,
uh their bios.
isn't that nice? I think uh, im- it probably gave bragging rights to the theater's actors more than anything else. I'm a uh, I don't think anything I do has that much of an impact on the community. Um, I mean, I think the I think most people who read my reviews don't know my name.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm being naive. I mean, they know my name when they hit what I said, but so I think it was mostly bragging rights, and that's fine. I wanted them to have bragging rights,
Yeah.
but no other impact. I don't think. I don't think.
Do you wish you still had the MAC awards? Do you wish you were still doing them?
Yeah, yeah, because um, anything I can do to give theater a higher profile, I have always wanted to do, and I felt like as though the MAC Awards gave a higher profile. It was well read end of the year story, and so I wish that I could still do that, and give us all a chance to reflect on not only what we might have seen, but what we missed. And maybe next year I'm not going to miss a play by this company or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or I want to go see this actor.
Do you
So
have
I
a
miss having that kind of impact.
Did you ever have a play that really stood out to you as the best in a year, or was it always close? I mean, obviously it's hard to compare because they're
Yeah, and I would
so
have to
different.
pull up and look at all of the all of the plays I've seen. I can tell you I saw Hair at ATC probably almost every night.
Really?
Yeah, I mean they did such a great job with it, and it was of course my generation that this play came to fruition, and they did
Mm-hmm.
it was grand fun. I mean, it probably wasn't the best play I ever saw, certainly. Um, yeah, I can't think of any
I think
that you know,
my parents, the first show that they ever saw at ATC was Hair.
oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Did
I
they
think
like
so.
it?
They did, yeah, they liked it a lot.
Yeah, I really love musicals anyway. It's a really dopey side of me.
um, so you retired in 2019. Was that hard for you, taking a step back from the full-time side of things?
I Yeah, it was you know, when you retire, I mean, my identity was wrapped up in the newspaper. This is who I was, which is always a dangerous thing to do. You should never have what you do define who you are. But there was a part of me that was. So I stepped away from that. And it was like, not only what am I going to do today, but who am I?
Hmm.
And so it was hard to step away from it. It was time, but they haven't replaced me.
Yeah. Well, I know there's definitely a lot of people who, you still do review, but there are people who miss reading your reviews,
Oh,
all the time. So,
you are just flattering me. Thank you.
in case you don't know, every podcast I like to play a little trivia game with the guest about their profession. So I decided to call today's game Mac Attack. Um, so I'm gonna read you a quote that you wrote for the Mac Awards, praising one of the actors who I've had on the podcast, and you'll have to tell me who that actor is.
Will you tell me the play?
Yes, yeah, the
Oh,
plays are
okay.
in the quotes.
And you know that I can't remember my own name most of the time, but go ahead, let's try.
All right. So the first one is this actor displayed keen comic timing and some pretty classic double takes in Live Theater Workshop's production of Arsenic and Old Lace.
God.
It's an old one. I think it was 2006.
Yeah, it is an old one. Was it one of the two women in arsenic, or is it a male?
It's a male.
Oh God, I mean, I see him. For God's sake, I can't remember. 2006? Who
Stephen
was it?
Frankenfield.
Pardon me. Oh, Stephen, that's right. That's right. God, he can be so funny. He does have great comic timing.
He does. The second one is this actor played the Irish mother of Marion and Winthrop in The Music Man. She was so deeply rooted and just wonderful. We could watch her forever.
Um, I can still see her. I can't remember her name. Don't ever give me a quiz with names. But I do remember her. She was so wonderful.
Peggy O'Connell.
Yeah, Peggy O'Connell.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get any of those, but keep going. It's nice having memories of these great performances.
The third one is this actor was completely over the top in Live Theater Workshop's farce, The Game's Afoot, and we completely loved him for it.
That wasn't Stephen. Was it Stephen again?
It
No.
was Stephen. It was
Oh, it
Stephen
was?
again.
Okay.
And
He is.
he- I was reading through your old Mac Awards, and I was like, golly, Stephen's in all of these.
It's, I should have gone back to um each year, go back to previous year and say, oh God, am I just loading too much praise on one actor? Shouldn't be doing that.
And the final quote I'll give you is, this actor completely charmed. Watch that kid. He's got a future on the stage.
Yay!
I
Nate
wonder who that
Wiley.
could be. So I like to close off every podcast with the same 3 questions for every person, just as
Okay.
a comparison
Well, because it
point.
doesn't involve remembering names.
No, it doesn't. So I like to call these the theater threes. The first question is, what is your favorite musical?
Assassins. Have you ever seen it? Do you know it?
I know of it. I've read a couple of scenes from it. I haven't read the whole thing.
It's just really brilliant. And Sweeney Todd. Sondheim is just captures me all the time.
Mm-hmm. The second question is, usually it's what actor did you look up to? But since you're a writer, what writer did you look up to as a kid and why?
My father. I mean, there are novelists, Fitzgerald and others that I thought were really wonderful and would read everything ever written. But as an active writer, my father was really wonderful and funny and kind of a brilliant editor. So it was so much fun to take, okay, how does this work, Dad? I mean, he was such, even long after he retired, he would sit down with a newspaper and a red pen and circle everything if he thinks, wait, this was way off. But he loved Tom Beale. He never had a pen for Tom Beale.
The third question is, what advice do you have for theater kids or any aspiring writers out there?
Don't ever expect to get rich, but always expect to be fulfilled if you keep doing it and knowing that what you do makes a difference. So don't give up.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today, Kathy. I really appreciate it. As always, it was a pleasure. If you are interested in reading Kathy's reviews, you can click on the link in the show notes. That's all for this episode. See you next time. TheatreQs is produced by Nate Wiley Productions and me, Nathaniel Wiley, featuring music by Joyheads. Joyheads is a Pasadena-based music group composed of Juan Gomez, Daniel Johnson, and Jeremy King. The song that you heard in this episode is A Real Good Time. If you like what you hear on this podcast, follow the podcast and check out our website, natewileyproductions.com, for a wide variety of content, from historical series to photo galleries and much, much more. Thank you all so much for listening today.